Hey everyone, this is Dan. This video is about network decay and privacy. I think of this video as being positioned as an addendum to the video on relational dialectics and communication privacy management that you've already watched. So time moves on. Petronium and Child's chapter is now several years old. When I started teaching it, it was very fresh and conceptually robust. I still think it's extremely conceptually robust. In fact, I think many of the reasonable sort of predictions that you could draw out of the discussion from that chapter have been proven correct, which is great, except that it's depressing. Here's what I mean by that. So if they're right that the exposure to publicity or the feeling that boundaries or boundary expectations have been violated causes people to become less permeable, to share less information, tends to say if you are now no longer going to be sharing, it makes it more difficult for new social networks to bubble up, for new kinds of activities to happen. So some people have gone as far as saying that the Facebook moment was a one-time thing. And so now Facebook will persist and not really be challenged as a dominant social network, not because they're great, but because people simply won't do the social work necessary again to cause the network to exist, which explains why Facebook has various friend problems, why different sorts of boutique products have popped up, like a Yik Yak, Snapchat, etc. So publicity orientation, this is a Stutzman et al. Article. It's linked in the syllabus. You should read it. They found three things. A, people were seeking more privacy over time. B, that Facebook was often circumventing privacy settings. And C, that more diffusion of information was happening to connected profiles. So at one point, they asked people to link their profiles to others for the purposes of trying to rebuild the idea of networks. This is a little Facebook historical note. People got used to the idea of the 2008 to about 2011 Facebook, where there weren't necessarily networks. So way back when in Facebook, back when many of y'all were like elementary school kids, Facebook had networks. And so in your network, you'd click on your college, and you'd be able to see all the profiles and statuses of all the people who were a part of that network, regardless of if you were friends. This is early Facebook. This changed, and they got rid of those networks, and then they brought in this idea of linking, which then increased that sort of data transfer again. So they're saying people are looking for more privacy. This generally confirms what Child's Petronium were finding. Now, this is a heat map from that research. You can see that there's change over time, that in about 2005, disclosure was extremely high. People were very willing to say their high school, their hometown, books, movies, etc., birth date. And now, you see a dramatic decrease, especially there after the end of the networks, and then bringing the linked pages, so you see some restoration in 1011. But you see a real consistent decrease in willingness to disclose information on Facebook. So if you think of like 2005 to 2007 as a unique period where people were particularly public, that would explain some of this phenomena. So Facebook then creates a sort of ambient awareness for people that they have information around, that they're willing to share. There is research about the idea of enough silent listeners, that there are people who are just absorbing information around the network. And especially if research is right, that as people become more reflexive, they post less, it would seem that Facebook is evolving into an audience of people who are listening to each other. Here's some Kavanaugh 13. You can see across countries a very different set of ideas about privacy. So you see in the United States that people are not comfortable at all revealing emails, location, phones, even employer. You can see really the only thing people are willing to disclose or are very comfortable disclosing are things like their interests, groups that they belong to, religion, and possibly sending out links. But after that, people start getting very, very reticent very, very quickly. So Facebook is constantly changing, and that is something that's hard about teaching this class. So network effects maintain Facebook dominance. Frankly, the old school well of data they have and its slow change may be the crown jewel of the social network era. What I mean by that is Facebook has a giant pile of data about a lot of people, even if that data isn't being shared. And this data and its ability to be used in marketing is probably the most important single asset that was created during Facebook's rise. Now, if that justifies Facebook's valuation or their ability to place ads, that's another question. But this might be it. Now, network effects, you'll hear more about in classes with Bill Logis, where we talk about the idea that the network could be robust and valuable just because of its sheer size. So in some critical ways, Facebook may be just too big to fail, or at least too big to collapse quickly. Projects like Elo, that was a boutique social network a while back, assume a greater willingness to do work of social networking than may actually exist. People don't want to rebuild their social networks. That would take a lot of work. And frankly, if Facebook provides that ambient awareness you're looking for, And frankly, research can become stale pretty quickly. I mean, if you read older research articles about Twitter, they may include methods and ideas and relationships and famous people who don't even exist anymore. So things can get stale quickly, but approaches don't get stale very quickly. So the sort of theoretical trajectory we're taking here about evaluating balancing and relational equilibrium, that persists and will persist for quite a while. Unfriending happens. Jennifer Bevan's research says it's generally expected, which would suggest that unfriending has context. People generally don't defriend people out of the blue, but for reasons like that they're filling their wall with something they don't like, that they simply just don't even want to have that person see or be able to read their material anymore. I think you all probably know people who are unfriended. You have unfriended people, something like that. There's also a risk that a lot of this publicity activity is starting to flatten activity. So social networks have increasingly seemed to be using a form of basic faded communication. Graham in 14 discusses this. Faded communication was initially described by Roman Jacobson in 68. It's these kinds of speech acts that you do that coordinate everyday life. So things like, "Hi, how are you?" "Well, I'm good." People don't expect to have a deep conversation. These are just ways of structuring and organizing everyday life and time. And so that sort of coordinating communication is important. I think people overlook a lot of it. A lot of people misunderstand that when people say they're sorry, that's actually just a fadic expression to move a conversation forward. People are not really sincerely apologizing. And so there are all these little coordinating speech acts, and generally it's very low-risk communication. And so I think one of the things we've seen a lot in Facebook statuses over the years, and studies of changes in statuses, is that people are more likely to do these little fadic things. And so this, to me, is one of the main way we can actually understand sharing lunch pictures, and that people need a low-risk talking point to share. They need some kind of way to check in with the network and say, "Yes, I'm here." And so this is the kind of way that listening actually works on Facebook, that you're looking for people to give off signs that they're actually hearing you, or that they're engaging with you, or that they're out there. And so you send out these messages to make sure that the network is still intact. And frankly, this is why Facebook is really interested in what you write into the status box and then delete, as well as what you initially post. Given this new sort of fadic orientation toward what you're actually wanting to share on the network, it seems entirely possible that those little things that you don't share may actually be really useful for understanding why you use social networks and what the future of those networks could be. So this would generally suggest the argument that Facebook was a one-time network event, Facebook as a one-time thing, really does have something to it, which is depressing in that there probably won't be a competitor that can successfully engage the world. But at the same time, it's really interesting because now we know that. So fundamentally, we're balancing publicity and privacy. Publicity is necessary for democracy at some level. You have to have some way of making people intelligible to the system. You have to count votes. You've got mass publics. I think we talked about this at some length in 101. At the same time, though, there are paradoxes in publicity and privacy. Two big paradoxes that get discussed a lot are the privacy paradox and the control paradox. Privacy paradox is people seem like they want privacy, but they aren't willing to put in any effort. And so people, this to me is the reason why Google Plus, something we used to talk about more in this class years ago, why it was such a disaster. And I think people got that right away, that Google had simply misunderstood the privacy paradox, that people say they want privacy, but they don't really want to do anything. At the same time, this also explains their changes in boundary orientation. So the thing that they want to do the thing that protects privacy, that takes the least work. And so what they do is they just don't share, because it's a heck of a lot easier for me not to post a controversial Facebook status than to figure out which people I want to send it to. Now, control paradox says people, when you give them controls over their ability to share information, actually take more risks. That's interesting, right? There was some research way back when about people driving in a more risky way once they had seatbelts. I'm not sure if this is still true today. I haven't done a literature review on it. But the idea of the control paradox is you give them a privacy slider, and they may actually decrease their privacy manually. So think about that when you see activities by, say, Facebook to have a privacy settings check-in. In one sense, this is ostensibly intended to help you protect your privacy, but instead of setting the default to be quite private, people will actually make it less private than it was before. So welcome to the fun world of paradoxes. So you have to balance publicity and privacy. So you want publicity to exist, and people want to manage their relationships. They want control and they want privacy, but then they do really weird counterintuitive things when you actually give them access to the controls.